Welcome to Building Inclusive Digital Communities with Josh Hotzenpiller and Megan Martin. Discover how that human connection actually accelerates business objectives. Get ready to transform and grow.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Inclusive Communities. We are very blessed to have Derek Thomas joining us all the way from Atlanta today. So, Derek, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. I'm glad to be here. We got to catch up on our old Atlanta days from when I lived there. And tell us a little bit about you, what you do, what does day-to-day look like for you?
Sure. Well, I am the Chief Strategy Officer for Galway Holdings. Galway Holdings is a holding company for a number of intermediaries. So we have our Epic Insurance Brokers and Consultants, which is our retail insurance brokerage business. We have GenCap and Paragon that fall into Galway Specialty Wholesale, and that's wholesale business as well as managing general agent, managing general underwriter related business. And then we also made an acquisition of a company called MAI in the wealth management space. So my responsibilities as a Chief Strategy Officer I work for our chairman, John Hahn, and I work on a number of major strategic initiatives from digital transformation, business transformation, things around what the world knows as ESG, DEI, and other things that are really important to driving enterprise value within the organization. I'm also the president of Galway Strategic Solutions, and I work with an internal consulting team that supports me on all of the initiatives that we're trying to drive strategically.
Wow. I mean, quite the responsibility and quite the diverse industries that you find yourself in. Do you think being in those very different sectors, of the economy of the world, help you think differently when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
Absolutely. I happen to be in an industry that is not extremely diverse in terms of senior levels throughout the industry. So in my career, I've been very fortunate. I've had a lot of great mentors of, Black, white, Latino, Asian, straight, gay, that have really been great sponsors and mentors for me. And that having happened to me earlier in my career, that is something that I advance. And I happen to work for a gentleman that, firmly believes in diversity and inclusion and creating a culture that is available for people to join our organization and to thrive within our organization. So whether I was at, publicly traded companies, privately held companies in this industry, diversity has always been kind of front and center as something that's important to me. To make sure that we have great representation on behalf of our clients and great thought process within our organization as we brainstorm and innovate on behalf of our organization and our clients.
That's awesome. And also some of the things that resonated when I was preparing for our conversation today was some of the things that you've talked about over your career as far as diversity, which, sexual orientation is diversity, gender, racial diversity. But one of the things that you've kind of touched on is generational diversity.
Absolutely.
And how does that play into your strategy? And is that helpful when you have people coming from different backgrounds, different generations, when you're thinking about innovation?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And it's a great question. I have been fortunate to, as a strategy officer, I get involved in a lot of things that start with a blank piece of paper. And so from the conceptualization of the idea or the establishment of the vision, obviously then going to what is our mission, goals, and objectives, it's all about team. So I use a pretty simple formula of strategy, structure, process, people, and alignment. So once the strategy is clear and we have a perspective on structure and what we need to accomplish, then it's a matter of pulling the team together. I manage a major strategic initiative right now that's in the area of digital and business transformation. I have individuals that are older than me on my team, significantly younger on my team, diverse representation from a generational standpoint, as you stated, but the ability to bring those folks together, to innovate, to brainstorm, to bring their collective experiences, or in some cases, lack of experience, which is really thinking blue ocean. We are able to get to a whole nother level of dialogue, in some cases discourse, but the output is something that is well thought out. We're looking at things from multiple angles, and we're really leveraging the strengths of everybody on the team to bring a collective voice to a solution, either organizationally or on behalf of our clients. And that for me is seeing diversity in action on a daily basis. Our client base is changing, right? So, our client base is becoming more diverse, younger entrepreneurs. You have to be able to speak to people and meet them where they are. We still have a number of clients that are older clients. And so you can't say we're just going to focus on everything being high tech, low touch. We have to have balance. So the diverse representation in our organization absolutely has an impact on how we engage with our clients and our business partners internally and externally.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And just thinking about the workforce in general, I think we have 4 different generations all participating in, full-time work now, which I'm not sure the last time that's probably happened with such. And then thinking about the technology advancements that have happened from the baby boomers to the Gen Zs that are now entering the workforce, and how differently the world has been for those, polar generations that are entering. I think that speaks to a lot of the diversity that you just talked about.
Well, you bring up a great point, and then you add a pandemic and everybody, working differently. Yeah. So, I think about the power of technology and how it has connected people or kept people connected and really formulated some teams that would not traditionally have been formed, right? You don't have the social elements, which I think is a challenge around esprit de corps, right? Like, what are we doing after work? How do we get to know each other beyond Zoom? I think that's a bit of a leadership challenge right now. But what it really has done is said, who's the best person for the position, irrespective of anything other than their capabilities, skill set, passion, desire, and will. And then if you can bring those people together, the generational impact, which in a traditional social situation may not always jive, but I think we've been able to do some amazing things, and my team has been 100% virtual since before the pandemic, and is a diverse representation of the talent in our organization.
And that was going to be my next question. So great segue is,
right,
what
great.
does that team look like? Is everyone in Atlanta with you? Are you geographically dispersed? Where does that look?
No, we have people both East Coast, West Coast, and Midwest. So, I have folks in Philadelphia, Northern California, Florida. Obviously, I'm here in Atlanta, folks in Michigan, and also Southern California. But because of what I do, we're also interacting with project teams all over the country that are not even within our organization. So we have underwriting partners who are all over the country. We have technology partners that are based in Boston and Dallas. So it is, as I was, mentioning on another podcast recently, we probably have 90 to 100 people working on a project. And a lot of them we've not even met in person because the project started at the beginning of the pandemic. Right. So it's just been interesting to see how we've been able to leverage technology to manage our community and ecosystem around, driving towards aligned goals and objectives.
Yeah. And have you found your team being so geographically dispersed that some of that inclusivity became harder or easier because of technology, or because we have the tech now? Is it easier to engage with those people who maybe aren't down the hallway from you or in the office next to you? I mean, how have you found that balance of including everybody when they're not necessarily physically together?
So I think you need a great cadence of meetings, but not over meetings. So we have regular meetings on a weekly basis, bi-weekly basis, monthly check-ins, quarterly planning and review sessions. We try to get the team together, at least once a quarter or 3 times a year in person, because you have to have those points of relationship development and connectivity and talking about family and things that matter beyond the project, if you will. So I think it has been a leadership challenge to figure out, how do you manage and build team virtually? So, I think a lot of it is how we run our meetings and facilitate our meetings. We even have rotational facilitation, because through Zoom, you see how critical facilitation skills are. You may have a great team that can come in and just kind of bounce things off, but to really keep the ball moving, you have to have facilitation. You have to operate with project management discipline, and it's communicate, communicate, communicate. So, whether it's formal meetings or one-on-ones that I have with people on my team, you have to kind of meet people where they are. Some people like that formal structure. Some people like it a little looser. So for a leader, it's just constantly saying, how can I be as effective as possible and efficient with people's time to make sure that we drive all the right outputs? But you can't yield on the face-to-face, just in general. I think you have to try to build those touch points in.
Agreed. And do you find that having a fully remote team has allowed you to be a little more inclusive and diverse because you're able to include people that are outside of maybe your geographic network?
Another great point. I think on one hand, there's the challenge of our current state, and that is people either choosing to come back or not to come back into the office. But because we were 100% virtual, it meant I could find the right person, and it doesn't matter where they are. Yeah. It doesn't matter. So it actually opened up the talent pool of either people that I knew or was connected with or had a unique skill set, or because we, are doing a lot of work that, is throughout the United States, having people in different zip codes has been incredibly helpful. We turn lemons into lemonade and really have just found a way to say, this is the way the world is right now. Let's utilize this expanded reach to identify talent and put the best team on the field every day.
I love that. And how, now that you're able to expand that reach and zip code doesn't really matter, it's not the qualification for the job entry. How do you attract and empower diversity then? Now that the world is your oyster, what are some of the tactics you use to find that right fit?
Well, look, the good news is I work for a very large organization, and the goal is just not just myself, but what type of culture are we creating and how are we supporting and resourcing our leaders? And one of the things that, I talk about is I think people want to see people that look like themselves in organizations, and it creates a comfort level. I just had a conversation with a very diverse team in Napa, California last week, and we were talking about this issue. What's the first thing people do when they, go to look at an organization? They go to the website. They look at the leadership team. They look at, what are the values of the organization? Are they, supportive of climate related issues? Are they supportive of diversity and inclusion? Are they involved in their community? All of those are ways of which we can send a message around our brand as to what matters to us. And what we want to be able to do is create a culture and have values that are attractive to diverse talent. But it also means having diverse leadership, the ability to have sponsoring and mentoring when you join an organization, because that is a big part of how you navigate an organization. So we're constantly looking to diversify at multiple levels within the organization. We have a chief diversity officer in our largest entity, which is Epic Insurance Brokers and Consultants. And from a Galway Holdings level, we just want to constantly reinforce the things that matter to the overall ecosystem and then support the execution within the operating companies as to power and empower our companies around things like diversity and inclusion.
I think that's awesome. And what are some of the obstacles maybe that you've overcome in building that community and building that ecosystem and trust across your culture? Juno is a fully remote company, so I fully understand and live that every day. We practice, our culture and our values at the beginning of every single meeting that we have internally and externally, because I think when you're this geographically dispersed, that matters more than when you're down the hallway and can have those informal, hallway chats, cubicle chats, whatever it might be. So what are some of the obstacles maybe that you had to overcome in this diverse team, in this geographically diverse team, to keep that culture and trust, going?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that you hit on. I think organizationally, leadership, and we have a chairman who believes in culture. We have CEOs of our different operating companies that believe in diverse cultures, and they have to build in and have had to build elements of systemic processes to ensure that you have to be purposeful, right? Which means that if you don't have it as part of your recruiting strategy, you're not going to recruit diverse talent. If you don't have an environment where people feel comfortable and they can be themselves at work, you're going to lose diverse talent and you won't be able to attract diverse talent. So the word I would use as to what we are doing in our organization is we are being very purposeful. Our industry is historically an apprenticeship industry. It's a who you know industry, and it has been largely, led by, white males. And so if there is no introduction or break from a traditional, community relationship structure, which is these are the people in my neighborhood, this is who I know, these are the people I hire, it's really hard to diversify if you do not live in a diverse community or diverse area or have a diverse thought process. So if you don't put processes in place, whether it's hiring and retention and promotions and sponsorship, it doesn't happen. So step number one as an organization, we are being very purposeful. I do that as an individual leader. The leaders that I work with, this is top of mind. These are conversations and our all hands calls that are happening and our HR related updates and our business updates. It just has to be front and center. And you've got to recruit younger people and train younger people, but we also have to become an organization that attracts mid-level and senior level, diverse talent. And we just have to, realize that we're competing for talent every day. Yeah. So since we are in professional services and what we do for a living is provide service to people, it's a people business, then all of these things really matter.
I think the people business part of it has lost and also accelerated during the pandemic. I think at the end of the day, we can't forget that there's always a human on the other side of the phone, the text message, the computer. That human connection piece becomes so important when we're talking about inclusivity and meeting people where they are and embracing the differences. Something you said in your last point was about diverse thought. And I don't know that gets discussed enough when we talk about inclusivity and diversity. And I hope it's okay if I talk about your son. The story of your son resonated with me a lot. I also have family members on the spectrum as well. And our family took similar approach of immersion and
That's right.
Not allowing that to make them different. They think differently. That doesn't mean they're different.
That's right.
So talk to me a little bit about how you guys embrace diverse thought as part of your inclusion strategy.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate you bringing that up. My middle son, Miles, is on the spectrum, and early in his career, he was originally identified with general anxiety disorder before there was an Asperger's label. That was in second grade. Thank goodness my wife was a teacher, and we had access to resources. And for parents, that's the most important thing. Can you identify the resources that can help you navigate challenges, or especially around learning disabilities or social challenges? We made the decision to keep him, in a mainstream program with IEPs throughout his, elementary, middle school, and high school career. Even though he struggled on the social side, he went on to a program at Kennesaw State University for students with disabilities, then went on to Reinhardt and got his associate's degree. But keeping him in the mainstream and keeping him included in the process versus set aside from the process, you don't realize until your kids get older that they hear what you say and that they are influenced by all of those things. And it has led him to be an incredibly independent, wonderful young man who's got an amazing heart, and is working hard through challenges every day, but has the coping skills and the mechanisms to do so and bring something unique. I use that as an example of what it feels like, joining an organization and not being integrated into the organization. You can be in the company and be set aside and not feel like you are part of the culture. And as I mentioned, you don't have to be an extrovert. This isn't a slam against introverts that want their space. It is, what is it that you are thinking about in that space? And when you have the opportunity to communicate or show your work or show your value, that it just becomes part of the overall advancement of the organization. That's inclusion. It's not just social inclusion. That is one part of it, but it is thought process, perspective. Sometimes the quietest people in the room, when they finally say something, it's incredibly powerful. We have to be conditioned as an extrovert to listen and ask questions and learn, and then integrate, and then figure out how we show our appreciation for the diversity of thought, not just that extroverted person that is always upfront speaking, but we really talk about the power of teams and that no one person does anything alone, and that there's a spot for different types of personalities.
I love that. As a introvert myself, I struggled with that a lot early in my career of feeling included in the process because I wasn't always going to be the first one to speak up. And I actually have a sign hanging in my home office that said weird is a side effect of awesome, to remind myself to embrace my quirkiness and weirdness, because it really is kind of my superpower and has made me a very empathetic person. But a lot of that had to do with really great mentors and leaders in my life that really embraced that part of it and brought me into the conversation. So as a leader, how do you then approach maybe the person who's sitting quietly in the corner that you know their wheels are spinning, you know something's going on in there? How do you bring them into the conversation and make them feel included?
Well, you mentioned to me, you can go to leadership training programs, you can study leadership in college. And those are all important things for folks that really choose to double down on reading, and self-help books and all those things are great. But mentoring and coaching and sponsorship is mission critical to success. And that means that you have the ability, back to what I stated before about, meeting people where they are. I've got a young, really bright gentleman on my team who is extroverted in some ways, but is introverted in other ways, and is a strategic thinker and really into technology. And then I've got, people on my team that, are really, really smart, but don't say a lot. So I've got a diverse group. My job as a leader is to meet each of them where they are and to understand what their goals are, understand what their objectives are, what elements of, do they perceive as either a strength that they want to enhance or a weakness that they want to eliminate, and then finding a way to partner them with people where they can, I always say in sales, you go into a sales meeting with two people, there's a chance the client's going to like one of you. You go in by yourself, they're either going to like you or not like you, and the deal's on or off, right? So I really believe partnering people that have different and unique personality types and skill sets is important. And we use the example of ham and egg, right? So, what is that Batman and Robin type duo in any given situation? And then also being able to have one-on-ones and really talk to people about where they're going. And I think, as I say it all the time, I can't have anybody on my team I don't want to be successful, and I don't want anybody on my team that doesn't want to be on my team. That's not fair to anybody, right? So if you're on my team, my goal is success, which means I have to do the work to figure out what success means to you and help you achieve that. If I'm doing that, that means you're waking up every day realizing we have aligned goals, and then you are operating with, I have your back. And one of the things I say to the people on my team all the time and the people I partner with is, I have your back. And what that means is, whatever challenges we run into together. Whatever victories we have, we celebrate together. And that is part of how we drive Esprit de Corps.
And are you finding better business successes with that approach? I mean, are your projects hitting it out of the park because of the approach that you take?
Yeah, I think hitting it out of the park is a relative term when you're in a strategy role, right? So
of course,
our job is to see what other people don't see. I say this all the time. Our job is to see what other people don't see, build it, and then you show them and they go, oh my God, when did that happen? But never say, I told you so, right? So that's always the hardest part. Humility is a big part of what we do. But yes, when I look back at my career, I've either done R&D on opportunities that we did the analysis and decided not to advance. We did the analysis and decided to advance differently, or we did the analysis of the vision. It was spot on, and it has helped to drive, millions or hundreds of millions of dollars of value. I mean, our organization has gone from $50 million, over 15 years, from zero to $1.3 billion in revenue. And I joined, 10 years ago this October. And when I joined, we were $50 million. We've gone from 50 million to 1.3 billion. That's a lot of ideas. That's a lot of trial and error. But what I will just tell you is it all came down to the people that were pulled together to drive the build out of this organization. And because we've grown rapidly, we're constantly tinkering. We're constantly enhancing. And that really has been helped by a diverse pool of talent, either people that were organic to the company, people that were recruited into the company, or acquisitions that we've made. Because those acquisitions that operated one way for 20 years or a legacy business, they also have to be integrated. They come from a different culture. So again, we can slice and dice culture and diversity and inclusion. There's a core element of what it means, but then there's a more macro or broad perspective, which is just people that think differently or have different backgrounds and experiences or different thought processes. Can you bring them together around a common goal and have them be the best of human beings, which is to excel, create, and innovate?
Oh, I love that. And two things that you just said that really resonated. One is projects you didn't advance. Sometimes doing all of that work just to come to a no that this isn't the direction or isn't the project, I think is hard. So admirable that, to embrace that. Failure is not even the right word, but you go through the process just to say this maybe isn't working or maybe not the direction we want to take. And I think the other point that I kind of want to close out is tinkering, that this is an evolution. There's going to be people coming on and off the teams that sort of change the dynamic of how people work together. And that's why being inclusive is such a moving target, because it's always can be better. You can always bring in new voices, embracing new people on the team. So why don't you leave us with a final thought of, if someone was starting out to change their culture, to be more inclusive, building community internally and externally of their organizations, where's one place that they could start, knowing that it's an evolution and they might be tinkering with it for a while?
The first move is always strategy. Bring together a diverse group of people in your organization. And if your organization isn't diverse, bring together a group of diverse thought leaders or people with diverse perspectives. Because if the perspective is we're not diverse, we don't know how to do this. Well, first thing you can do is bring together people that are open-minded, who want to advance a strategy around diversity and inclusion. And then there's so many third-party resources that can be tapped into. I mean, that's why consultants are so huge around the world. That is bringing in an outsourced partner that can help you with what you don't have internally. So I think the first step is to have a big, bold vision and strategy. Think about what your desired state is. Be honest about what your current state is. Figure out what the gaps are, and then turn those gaps into an action plan. And an action plan where you hold people accountable and you have timelines and deadlines and measurements. Because if you do not build the infrastructure around purposeful activity, it usually does not happen. It becomes a meeting that leads to another meeting. So I think step number one is just be bold enough to say it matters, and then pull the right team together and empower them to build and do something great.
Oh my gosh, what a mic drop moment. So we're going to just leave it there. And I want to thank you so much. This conversation kind of went all over the map, and I very much enjoyed it. I think there's a lot of takeaway from our conversation of how to get started and where to think about diversity, and not just some of the, geographic or gender or racial diversity that we generally think about with that term, but really building inclusive teams and how that plays into a bigger organizational impact. So I want to thank you so much. Make sure you guys are subscribing, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us, Derek.
Appreciate it, man. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us. Let this story inspire you to the serious work needed to build an inclusive digital community that makes a difference for your network and your brand. For more conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to the show at junolive.com/podcast. Don't forget to share this show with your network so we can all learn from each other how to build inclusive communities. We'll be talking more about this episode on LinkedIn, where you'll find us under Juno Live. See you on the next episode.